All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Facebook Live. We are so excited to be with you again. Um, this is fun to get to do every week, and today's my birthday, so this is a fun.
Oh, I thought I got to be the one to say, it's my
I
birthday today.
I could like see you prepping for it. So like, let's just
She's
call
the
it out.
birthday girl.
Yeah, and there's nothing that I love more than inspiring other parents and trying to meet you where you're at and help them out and get to hang out with Janet and chat before this. It's always, I feel like we get a lot more out of it than anybody else does,
For
um,
sure.
which is really cool. Um, so we are going to talk about parent shame today. We know that this is something that's extremely common, that most parents experience shame at some point during their journey, that they feel like they aren't doing a good enough job, that they're letting their kids down in some way, that they aren't like the parents on Instagram or Pinterest or their neighbor, or that they aren't doing, that they aren't parenting in the way that their in-laws would have them parent or their parents would have them parent, or they see their kids struggling and they feel like it's their own fault, and their behavior is a sign of my failure. That's, oh, I shame spiraled super hard Sunday in that one. So parent shame is so real, it's so prevalent. It's also really toxic and unhealthy for us. And so we wanted to talk about it a little bit today, pick it apart, kind of give you some antidotes and a different option to experience other than shame. But we wanted to talk about shame a little bit first, help us understand what shame is, how it feels, what it does in our body, so that we can kind of get that why behind why it's not good for us, and it's time to move away from it. But then whenever we're moving away from one way of behaving and interacting with ourselves or with the world, we've got to replace it with a different option. Otherwise, our habitual bodies will just go back to the old one.
Love it.
So, Janet, do you see, like, in your practice in therapy, whether it's with individuals or with families, that shame is a common issue that people are running into?
Yep, for sure it is. It's out there all the time. It really does kill um, families. I mean, I would say that was one of the worst things for families is having the shame.
Hmm.
That shame is one thing that if you get rid of it, makes everything better. And so, yeah, shame is there's no place for shame in the
Yeah.
world. I mean, it is something that um, I was just going to say evil. It is. It's just there. Shame isn't anything we want our kids to feel. We don't want to feel it. We don't want anyone to feel that.
Yeah.
So, we should go on a shame. Get rid of shame for
Yeah.
sure because it's a killer.
Shame. There's there's this movie Anastasia, the animated Anastasia. There's this
Uh-huh.
little bat in it, and he always says, "Stress, it's a killer." But maybe it's shame, it's a killer. They're both killers. So I
But
want to
guess
pick
what?
that.
Shame probably creates a lot more stress than we ever imagined.
Yes. Okay, so I want to come back to some of that in just a minute. But if you had a new client coming in and you could see that they were experiencing a lot of shame, but they didn't know what shame was,
Mm-hmm.
how would you describe it to them? How would you help them get an understanding of what shame really is?
Um, Most people have an understanding of shame.
Okay.
Um, I think that the problem is that they don't realize how bad it is for them. Sometimes I think that they think that it's useful and helpful for
Mm,
them to change, and it's not. So that's usually where I'm at is just explaining why shame isn't there isn't any good to shame. It is, it's just bad juju that we picked up from our parents. you know.
Yeah. I've never heard you say juju before. I'm loving this moment.
My kids use it all the time, bad juju.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I picked it up from them. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Shame is really bad juju. We don't want it. And so that is one of the first things in therapy that all us therapists need to get rid of, because when people are in shame, they're not going to change. First off,
Okay.
all they're going to do is be victims,
Mm.
you know, and that's where they're going to stay. And so, yeah, we want to get rid of shame.
So when we're shaming ourselves and just saying like how much we messed up and we're such screw ups and we don't have, we did X, Y, and Z today, or we'll never be X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm.
that we are actually taking away all of our power by
Yep.
staying in a victim place instead of a victor place
Yep.
where we
Mm-hmm.
are empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I learned about was the neuroscience behind shame, and I always love to share a little bit of that. And that is that when we are being attacked, like say that we were in a fight and we were being attacked, our brain would release cortisol, which would put us into our fight or flight mode. And cortisol feels yucky. It doesn't feel good. It's really hard on our bodies. And it keeps us out of the thinking part of our brain where we can make logical choices and move forward in a logical way. So that's when we're being attacked. Now, when we're being the attacker, like say that we were fighting someone, we would experience that same release of cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are being hard on ourselves and we're shaming ourselves, we are actually both the attacker and the attackee. And so we experience double the cortisol.
I like that.
And yeah, so we are way in our animal brain. So, like you said, we just are playing victim or perpetrator,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not in our logical brain. So, we can't make logical decisions and move forward. Instead, we are either just fighting ourselves or we're frozen. And I've definitely seen that when I'm experiencing shame, that I freeze
Yep.
and I am no longer in power. I'm no longer taking action. I'm no longer making logical decisions. It's all just emotional decisions. And the emotions that I'm experiencing are incredibly negative because I'm both the attacker and the attackee. And so then my actions are incredibly negative, which then is like adding gasoline to the fire. See, Celeste, now you're feeling shame and you can't even get up and do anything. You're such a worthless mom, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So, um, so you see that shame is incredibly unproductive
yep.
and that it doesn't help people at all. But where do we start to get this shame from? Like this idea that we should be better, we should be different. Anytime we have should in a sentence, should and shame start the same way.
Exactly.
So, and my mom always says, don't should on yourself. So should and shame go together, but like where do we get the idea that we should be different?
Where do we get the out? Just from society, from our parents, because they were full of shame usually. I mean, we pass on shame, and the world is, you know, full of shame, and we're just barely learning, now how important compassion is,
Yeah.
and compassion is really the antidote to shame. And so yeah, it comes from everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, it just it's out there, and we need to shift over. It's kind of like what you were saying before about the shame magnet. Kind of
Yeah.
explain that to them.
Yeah. So what I was telling Janet is that I feel like shame feels like a big old, I don't know if you guys know what rare earth magnets are, but they're very powerful. they're very strong, and you can have metal like kind of further away and it will draw the metal in, and then it will be hard to take the metal off. And as soon as I start to should on myself, it's super powerful and I'm drawn in super fast, and then it's hard for me to get out of that position.
Mhm.
And I like what you're saying, and this is something that I learned in a self-compassion class, is that shame is social, that it really is that construct from everywhere around us, from
Mhm.
social media and internet to TV to our interactions with parents, like at school or PTA or whatever, that what we show people everywhere is best foot forward and what everyone should be doing. And what we are not showing people is how flawed we are at everything
Mhm.
and how messed up we all are every day. And
Yeah, we're
so
all
I'm,
practicing.
yes. And so I'm always comparing my messy to everyone's polished. And so shame is really from what we think we should be doing as a parent or what our kids tell us we should be doing as a parent. But we wanted to teach all of you guys that you one of the things we want to help you to do is separate from the shame that comes from social stuff and take some time, you as an individual, to decide what it means to you to be a good parent. Jotting it down, like, what are your values as a parent? Janet and I were talking before that her values, once she pushed away everybody else's thoughts and everybody else's like expectations of her, were very different than what she expected. Can you share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. Yeah. When I've ever done my values, I'm always just going, what value should I have? you know, and that's what I've always done. And now it's like, what values do I really want? And what are my really, what are my values that get me excited? And I was telling Celeste that one of my values is, um, to be adventurous. That is, I get excited about being adventurous. And I wanted to mention right here that I think that, when you were talking before about how we look on Instagram or Facebook and we see these people living their dreams, and then we think we need to be like them. And we do need to be like them in the fact that we're living our dreams, right?
Mhm.
But what their dream is might not be your dream, you
Yeah.
know? It's like my sister, my daughter that travels, and she's on Instagram and Facebook, and people go, "Oh, I want to do that." You know? And I've asked them, "Do you really want to do that?" And they go, "No, it looks fun, but I wouldn't want to travel around and do that." And so I think a lot of times it's just us looking what it are your values. What really sounds exciting to you? Our values should be so exciting to us and what we want, not those shoulds. And
Yeah.
so for us to be able to decide what we like and to enjoy those people living their dreams. And I was at a wedding reception and everybody's saying, how you doing? They all say, I'm living the dream. I'm living the dream. And I went, oh, wow, that's a new thing out there, living the dream. But that is what we should all do, is live our dream, not somebody else's dream, our dream, and come up with your things that are important to you and then go from there. Don't worry about, what anybody says to you, because some people would say, well, don't you think you're getting a little too old? You should be responsible. Well, yeah, maybe they can think that and they can be responsible because that works for them. But being responsible isn't one of my goals. I'd rather be adventurous. So,
Yeah.
and some people, in our homes, we've talked about this before. Their goal isn't to have their kids all speak one at a time. They like the energy of everyone talking, and that's important to them. To somebody else, it's really important. No, let's take our turns and talk. And we need to decide what we want in our home.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think that not what we should do, but get it to where we want it. But you've got to decide what you want that to look like. And that's what
Yeah.
we're always saying. You know, you search after what's important to you, write it down so you can review it often and see if you're hitting your values, not other people's values.
So good. And and just to like tag on to that, that like parent shame comes so much from how we think we should be as a parent. So in this specific situation, write down what it means to you or what would bring you delight as a parent. For
I
me,
like that word delight, because that
yeah,
is exactly what we want them. We want them to be delighted with what they're coming up with, not drudgery.
right. Right. And so for one parent, it could be I delight in going to lots of sports activities. And so I want my kids involved in lots of sports. For another parent, it could be I delight in more intimate time together and one-on-one time. And we can't do that when we're doing sports. And
Mhm.
so I want fewer extracurricular activities. For one family, it could be art. For another, it could be hiking. Whatever it is that brings you delight, and whatever it is that means being a great mom to you or a great dad to you, not to somebody else.
Yep.
So, for me, some of my values are that my kids feel seen and heard one on one. And so I make time in each week to have a date with each of my kids. That's a value to me. And that's something that if we got to the end of our life and I hadn't done that, that I would have some regret about. And so that's what I put my emphasis on. And if my emphasis were traveling around the United States, I would shift it to that instead. So it's looking at those values, and then it's having those values written down somewhere clearly and being intentional each day about trying to live in alignment with those values.
Yeah. And
And
intentional is so important.
yes,
Yes.
if we are unintentional and we let our subconscious run the show, we are not going to live in alignment with our values at all.
And you're going to live
Because
in shame, because that's
yes,
what our subconscious has. Shame, shame, shame. It's shame filled for
it
sure.
is.
Mm-hmm.
It is like that will be your permanent mailing address.
Yes.
Yes. So we have to like intentionally live in alignment with these values, but we're human. And so we will never live 100% in alignment with our values any day that we're alive,
Right.
ever. And so we wanted to teach a concept of course correcting with compassion. So some people hear about self-compassion and they get the misconception that it's just being so soft and understanding on yourself and justifying all of your actions. So then you just become this like mediocre loser
Yeah.
who's who's not achieving goals, who's not moving forward, who's not being the best version of themselves. And what one of the big researchers, Kristen Neff on self-compassion says,
I like her.
oh yeah, love her, read all of her stuff, is that an element of self-compassion is inviting yourself to be a better version of yourself every day, but doing it in a way that is kind. So I wanted to give an analogy of this, and this was taught by a friend of mine who is an athlete, and she's played sports all of her life. And she's had some coaches who are really intense, who have mean words, a mean tone of voice, and are berating. So if she didn't play up to snuff, she'd get pulled out of the game and chewed out. And then she had coaches who were kind and compassionate, still really pushed her really hard,
Mm-hmm.
saw potential in her, were still honest about the times where she had made mistakes, but then gave her some ideas on how to course correct and then cheered her on while she was course correcting and then pointed out the positive when she did course correct. And in the end, both of the coaches wanted the same thing from her, which was her best game, but they had two very different approaches. The mean, berating, poor tone of voice, pointing out the negative, kind of coach versus the compassionate, kind, still pointing things out, but with some ideas of what to do instead. And the one that brought the most change out of her, or the ones that have, were the ones that were kinder and compassionate. They were
Mm-hmm.
still incredibly honest about times where she had messed up. And we can do this as parents. So, say that I have a value of not screaming at my kids. That is one of my values.
Mm-hmm.
And I live out of alignment with that some days. I will totally lose my bonkers. I will go bonkers on my kids sometimes. And old me would be like, what is wrong with you? You're such a bad mom. You're such a bad example. You're out teaching parenting stuff. And then here you are yelling at your kids. They're all going to need therapy and it's all your fault. And just the list goes on. And the tone of voice is so mean. And the feeling that comes with it is so mean. But self-correcting with compassion would be some validation about my experience. Of course, you were mad. They've been butt heads all morning. It makes sense that you're mad. That was sad that you lived out of alignment with your values. And here's what you can do next time: you can hold your boundaries sooner before you start to lose your mind. You can leave the room. You can go out and say, you guys have been hard this morning, and I'm going out and I'm going for a walk. So I'm still being honest about what's going on, but I'm giving myself some validation. I'm telling myself a different course to take next time, but my tone of voice is totally different. And the words that I'm using are totally different. And I'm staying out of my animal brain. And so I'm actually more capable of making that change that I'm desiring to make. That was a lot of me. Okay, Janet, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to tell you on your value is not to scream at your kids. Tell me, change that to a positive value.
Mm, my value, honestly, it's to be a warm, safe place for people to be,
Okay. And
to
so I would
experience.
take the not screaming out to being a warm, because when we say we don't want to scream,
Oh, then
you
we
know,
then we focus on screaming.
yeah, yep,
It's like, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think
right,
of a pink elephant. And all you can see is the pink elephant.
right. And so
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that for them as they're coming up with their values, because we do that a lot. I do the same thing and have to course correct
Hmm.
and do it. And then and so that's, I mean, you said it. That is what we do. That self-compassion is so important, because if we don't have it, self-compassion is all about love. And we should always love our kids and we should always love ourselves. And so, of course, self compassion is going to be really important. When our kids see us use self compassion, they're going to have self compassion too. They know it's okay for them to make mistakes. When
Mm,
they see us beat ourselves up because we make a mistake, then they go, oh, we shouldn't make mistakes. And that's bad. And so we are furthering on the shame.
yeah.
We're making that magnet stronger for our kids, and we want to get them further and further away from that magnet.
Hmm.
And so if we are going to shame, our kids are coming with us.
Yeah.
And so if you stay here and you have self-compassion on yourself, then you're going to be able to move further and further away from that shame magnet
Mm,
and closer to compassion and understanding and love. And you know a family full of shame is not a happy place.
mm-mm.
you know but a family full of self-compassion and compassion,
Yeah.
whoa, compassion is just the opposite of shame.
It
and
is.
and that's where we want to be, and that's how we change.
Hmm.
That's how our kids change. When they see us give self-compassion, they'll have self-compassion. When they make a mistake, they know it's okay. They'll tell us more about their mistakes, talk to
Yeah.
us more. We can encourage them more. But the other is just we're trying to hide who we are. I mean, it is just destructive,
Yeah.
totally destructive. And so we want to, whenever we feel like, oh, we shouldn't have done that, then we go to self compassion and get in a good place. Just do what you did, course correct, and keep moving forward. And it's going to happen again, and you just keep course correcting, because that's all we can do
Yeah.
is course correct, because our subconscious mind's going to grab us,
Yeah.
going to try to pull us off this new course because it's trying to protect us. Our
Yeah.
brains are so silly that way, aren't
Yeah. I I agree. There's a lot about our brains that I
they?
have some beef with.
Yep. But
Uh,
I liked how you earlier you said you have to replace it.
yeah. The old behavior with something new.
Yep.
What's interesting is that as you're talking about modeling self-compassion so that your kids pick up on self-compassion, I started to slip into feelings of shame. Like just about that. Like
Uh huh.
my kids are hard on themselves when they make mistakes and it's my fault. It's because of what I've
Uh,
modeled. And so just right then I had to like that feeling and pay attention to what shame feels like for you. There's like this pit in my stomach. My heart feels like it's sinking. I can feel my mind getting into more depressive like thoughts. And so I could feel that. And that is a sign to me that I need to like put my hand on my heart and say, I I have time to undo generations of shame. And I'm taking on that huge monumental task. And of course it's going to take me time.
for sure.
And and just kind of give some validation there. And then that course correct. So I've like validated and now course correct. So something I can do is notice shame sooner and catch it and work on it. And I like that you said all you can do is just your best, and that's it. And there's no way that any of us are going to turn around after listening to this and be shame free tomorrow and model that for our kids. But
For
I've got
sure.
decades of life still to go where they will be watching to see how I interact with myself. And if I am not super strong at this yet, I can be more and more each year, and that will have a positive effect. Even if they've left my home, it will have a positive effect for me to continue to work on the self compassion.
Yep. I think that sometimes we just need to laugh at ourselves too, that we always go to that shame, you
Yeah.
know, and just burst out laughing, going, "Oh my heck, I can't believe I did it again," you
Yeah.
know, and that comic relief sometimes, because sometimes we get so serious about it, you know,
It's like you
that
know me.
oh no, I would just, I'm talking about myself when I'm trying to change,
Hmm.
and, then I mess up, it's like this serious thing, like I'm supposed to be perfect. And, why did I do that again? You know, and
Yeah.
like when I had my grandkids that I told you guys last week about, um, just to laugh and, and go, yep, we know all the stuff, but we still go back to that. And, it's humorous
Yeah.
sometimes that we can't, we can't get it that fast, and that's okay.
And laughing it off could take us out of fight or flight mode super fast. And
Yep.
yeah.
Bring us back to our frontal cortex that we need to help us with our correction.
Yeah. Well, I
So
love that. We didn't have a chance to talk about good guilt versus bad guilt. So maybe we'll have to bring that up next week, like part two of this, because it's
but the good guilt, we can just go over that really quickly because it is really super easy is there's good guilt and bad guilt. And the good guilt is when it comes from you and your values. Bad guilt is when it comes from other people and other people's values.
Yeah.
That is the huge difference. And so never ever feel guilty because somebody says, well, you should have, you know, you just say to yourself, because you know yourself and you know why you're doing it. And as
Mm,
parents, you always need to look. That's one thing I wanted to add to it is, why did I just yell at them? Well, because I love them. I want them to change. I mean, there's always the good thing that we're trying to do, just like those coaches,
mhm,
but yeah, I want to be the coach that has the compassion. And the only way I'm going to do that is to have compassion for me.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, yep. So don't ever, you know, guilt is the only reason we have guilt is to bring us to know we need to course correct. And
Yeah.
that's it. You don't ever go further than that. You go, oh, I did something wrong. I need to course correct and be done with your guilt.
Yeah. Yes. And if you have a shame spiral and you got sucked into the magnet,
Yep.
have some compassion that you got sucked in.
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's just normal. I love that. So good guilt is when we see, oh, I've lived out of alignment with my values
Yep.
and now I'm going to course correct without beating myself up. And bad guilt is when our kids are trying to tell us to do something different, or our friends or family or society, and we can just shove that guilt away because that's unproductive. It's
Yep.
unproductive to try to live in alignment with other people's values because it
Yep.
feels off to us and inauthentic. So if we're living in alignment with ours, there is just this inner peace that comes from that. So
Yep.
I love that.
So
Well,
true. So true.
thanks everybody for being here today. Super fun to talk about this.
And as you listen to this, write in the chat, happy birthday, Celeste.
Yeah. Happy
Tell us how
birthday.
you listen to it.
And maybe share with us some of the values that you want to live by that come from you and not what everybody else is telling you you should be, but what feels right to you. That
Yep.
would be cool.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All
Bye,
right. We'll see
everyone.
you all next week.
Bye bye.